Good evening, everybody. That's a bit loud, right. Thank you very much for joining us. As you know, we're going to be running a little bit of a different meeting this evening because there are people who are online and those of you in the room. So please bear with us. We're going to have to speak to both audiences and I need to be quite close to this laptop for them to be able to hear what I'm saying. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Apologies if it was a little bit cumbersome getting registered, but we obviously have to ensure that we stick to the capacity of the room and that we've accurately identified everyone when it comes to casting votes. So for those of you that might not know me, my name's Helen Snell and I'm the acting chair of the SEBCID board. I'll be taking you through the proceedings this evening, which should take about 15 to 20 minutes in terms of the presentation. As usual, we're joined by representatives from the CID department at the City of Cape Town at the back of the room over there, all other SEBCID acting board members and all the individuals who've been nominated to stand for election as new directors to the board. Before we go any further, I do need to explain some very important points regarding the voting. Those of you in the room who are eligible to vote have been given a voting form with your name, earth and address as it appears on the city's rates accounts. Your form also indicates in red the number of votes you have according to your municipal property valuation, with each 5 million of value or part thereof being entitled to 1 vote. Regardless of this though, for the items on which we're voting this evening, please just tick whether you're in favour of or against, or of course abstain, on the items on the sheet. Then when the votes are counted, your preferences will be weighted by the number of votes that you have. If you own more than 1 urban, you will have been given a form for each earth. Those of you who are joining us online have been emailed the same personalised voting form to complete and have been emailed your vote weighting number to please add to the form where indicated. And as stated, those voting forms must be signed and returned via email within 60 minutes of this meeting concluding. Votes will then be amalgamated and reported back within 24 hours. And given the complexities of many property owners having more than 1 vote and the need to verify the identities of those voting, this is the process that's been established with the support of the City of Cape Town and has been successfully used by other CIDs. But just for anyone who might be rushing ahead to fill in their votes now, please make sure that you do read all the instructions on the sheet carefully, particularly with respect to the election of directors, where you may vote only for a maximum of 7. So now, moving on to the agenda.
Sorry, can I just on the point of questions, we prefer you to keep the questions to the end, but if I think there was one question regarding the mechanics.
Okay. Oh, does it? Sorry, is that better?
Okay,
right, yes.
Okay, so, but please keep your questions to the end, if at all possible. We're also going to be getting questions in the chat from the Zoom attendees, and we will be alternating the questions between the group here and the Zoom meeting, so we can kind of keep it balanced. Right, sorry.
Yep, no, that's fine, thank you. So moving on to the agenda, we'll first be confirming memberships of the SEBCID MPC. Obviously, since we've only just become established, these are all new members and there are no resignations. We'll then confirm that we have the required attendance, whether it be in person, online or via proxy to make this meeting quorate. I'll then move on to give a report on the activities of the CID to date since inception on the 1st of July. Although if you've been following our monthly newsletters, you'll hopefully be aware of much of what I'm going to say. We'll then present the proposed budget for year 2 of our CID term and the implementation plan for the same period and ask you to vote to approve these. The appointment of our registered auditor and company secretary will be confirmed, and then we'll move to your vote on the formal appointment of directors to the board. And finally, we'll take any questions that you have. So moving on to memberships, we're delighted that 152 of you have applied for membership of the NPC. That's equivalent to just over 30% of our property owners, and I understand this is a relatively high participation rate for CIDs, which is great. There's no deadline for applying for membership. Anyone who has yet to do so still can, but approved membership, yes.
If you speak without using a microphone, because there's a lot of echoing around the room.
I'll try to, as long as everyone can hear me, and I hope my voice lasts. Okay, forgive me if it doesn't. Okay. So anyone who's yet to apply for membership still can, but an approved membership is a prerequisite for voting. So anyone who's attended this meeting, for example, who hasn't yet applied for membership won't be able to vote, unfortunately. With 152 members, we need 31 members attending to be quorate. I've just been told that we have 23 in the room, and we have 53 proxies, so we're very comfortably quorate, and we obviously do have members online, but it's harder to ascertain, but we're well in excess of the quorum required. So then I want to just summarise some of the key milestones of the CID to date. SEBCID was formally established on the 1st of July 2020 in accordance with the City of Cape Town's financial year. Accountants and auditors have been appointed. Our public liability and directors' insurance is in place. An admin person, Emma, has been appointed, and a detailed procurement policy has been drafted and published on our website. In terms of service providers, after comprehensive tender processes, Deep Blue has been appointed to take care of our public safety requirements, and Allo Africa to ensure our public open spaces are kept clean and tidy on a daily basis. And while not a selection criteria whatsoever, we are pleased to have been able to appoint local Hout Bay providers, and we're unquestionably already seeing the benefits of partnering with companies who are based right here in the Valley. Via our social responsibility programme, we were very pleased to have made the first of a series of donations to the Hout Bay Volunteer Emergency Medical Service. We've scheduled our initial first aid training programme, and we're working with the IY Ukupila Community Cleanup, who are doing phenomenal work in the township. We've always stressed the importance of the SEBCID MPC being a regulated entity governed by the relevant regulations. In terms of our compliance, we were registered as an MPC by the 1 July deadline, and our bank account was open. We are registered for VAT and have applied for tax exempt status. The process of registering as a supplier with the National Registry and then the City of Cape Town itself was lengthy and complex, to say the least, but we finally completed it and therefore received our first funds from the city in August and are receiving regular monthly payments now. The one remaining item to be completed is to register as a community-based organisation, which must be done within our first year of operation and is underway. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time now reviewing what's been achieved in the three pillars of our core business, so to speak, and starting with public safety. As I said, Deep Blue was appointed at the end of September, and a time-consuming, very detailed process of determining the exact location of each proposed camera was undertaken. This has involved many, many hours walking the mountainside of our area and driving the streets, and has resulted in multiple iterations of the planned layout and specification of each camera type, as we've worked towards finding the best possible solution. We're confident we've achieved this, but as time goes by, there will be some inevitable gaps and tweaking, and we have budget set aside to plug any gaps that arise. So Deep Blue conducted a review of the 32 cameras which were already in place monitoring public spaces. Those were being funded either by Hout Bay Neighbourhood Watch or clusters of residents. They reviewed those to determine which needed to be replaced or upgraded in order to accommodate the advanced monitoring software we're deploying. And as a result, 30 were replaced with brand new hardware. The remainder have a year or two of service left in them. Of what is now planned to be a total 102 new cameras to be installed in phase 1 of the project, 50 have been completed, and the balance is due officially by the end of February, but should be much sooner. We have definitely encountered difficulties with supply, particularly the Wi-Fi dishes, but stock has now been sourced, so the rollout will move quite quickly now. And to those of you who are already kindly hosting cameras or who have agreed to host new cameras, we're very grateful. Just a reminder that if it has not been completed already, a brief agreement needs to be signed with the CID to formalise the arrangement. So as I mentioned, we are using some very sophisticated analytics to monitor the cameras over and above that which is embedded in the cameras themselves. This will run 24 hours a day on the cameras along our perimeter and in the hours of darkness for the cameras situated in the interior. In the event of an incident, all camera feeds are accessible to CCP WatchCon, who we know play a vital role in coordinating response to any incident. And for that reason, and in accordance with the business plan and the budget, we're making monthly contributions to CCP. Although I would stress that in year 1, this is only equivalent to around 18 Rand per home per month. So for those who can afford to continue making private contributions to CCP or to Hout Bay Neighbourhood Watch, I know that would be greatly appreciated by those organisations. So regardless of whether or not an incident is detected, the relevant individuals in the SEBCID team receive a daily email report on the monitoring of the cameras, and there's a dedicated WhatsApp group for 24/7 contact with the Deep Blue control room. As we've always planned, we have a dedicated response vehicle in the area 24/7, paying specific attention to the hotspots we've identified, such as the park at the bottom of Andrews Road, access points to the river corridor, the walkway path from Military Road to Bavianscliffe Road, and any major construction sites, which obviously come and go, but which we know can be flashpoints. And finally, we budgeted for recourse to a tactical vehicle in the event of a serious incident in our area, but we're very pleased that ADT has last month deployed a tactical vehicle dedicated to the whole of Hout Bay, and that will work hand in hand with CCP WatchCon in coordinating response to incidents. We believe this removes the need for us to contract out for the service, but obviously we'll monitor this closely since there's only one vehicle currently for the whole of the valley. So, moving on to environmental and urban management. Again, after a comprehensive tender process, we appointed Allo Africa to maintain our public open green spaces. Allo Africa is a Hout Bay business run by a chap called Andrew Preen, who I can say, having spent a great deal of time with him in the last few months, is passionate about green spaces in general, but also passionate about really making a difference in Scott Estate and Bavianscliffe. So through Allo Africa, we now have two guys, Ali and Stephen, who are working full-time, 5 days a week, keeping our public open green spaces clean and tidy. Here is a photo of them. They weren't very keen to pose for it, I have to say. But so while their remit is gardening, inevitably they spend a great deal of time collecting litter, particularly in the park at the bottom of Andrews Road. And I realise this is not necessarily visible to those who may just drive by, but if you want to appreciate the difference, please do drop by sometime and just walk around and see how clean and tidy it now is. And through their and Deep Blue's efforts, it seems we don't have anyone residing in the park currently, which is a relief. I do also want to extend our gratitude to Riverview Body Corporate, who are providing storage and ablution facilities to the Allo Africa team at no charge. In addition to the day-to-day maintenance, hopefully you will have noticed Allo Africa undertook a one-off clean-up project. Trees around the Scout Hall and along the river at the Greenbelt were cut back, giving the space a much open, safer feel and providing fewer places for anyone to sleep or hide. The dead alien tree opposite the Scout Hall was felled and removed. Access to the river at Coral Close was improved thanks to clearing of the overgrown vegetation. The walkway from Bavianscliffe Road to Military Road was spruced up through a lot of work, including cutting back the encroaching vegetation, the overgrown grass being cut back, taking away a lot of dump branches that were there, a lot of rubbish that had been left by people who'd been sleeping there, and also felling some alien trees. And finally, we've been very fortunate to have had a 6-man team from the City of Cape Town's Invasive Species Unit allocated to our area for 40 days. And they've been working alongside the Allo Africa team to remove aliens throughout our area, but specifically along the river corridor. And with the municipality finally cutting the grass in early November, our green spaces really look neat and tidy. So there's a few pictures of the work that's been done. This is the area around the Scout Hall, much cleaner and tidier. This is the walkway from Bavianscliffe Road to Military Road. That's Coral Close, access to the river corridor from Coral Close, and my dog. We've also undertaken some larger scale clearing in 3 key areas to create the equivalent of a mini fire break to provide adequate visibility for the security cameras being installed. So a stretch has been cleared behind the houses at the top of Bavianscliffe Road, along the back of Fountain Drive, and at the very top of Andrews Road, where it meets Chiltern Close. We did also take the opportunity at the same time to open up access to the waterfall walk at the top of Bavianscliffe Road. The large trees on the river corridor are scheduled to be removed in March of next year by the City of Cape Town's Invasive Species Unit. Not only are they alien, but they're a serious fire risk. So we'll liaise closely with the Invasive Species Department on the execution of that. There's also a cluster of pines on the right as you walk up to the waterfall from the top of Bavianscliffe Road. We have budgeted through SEBCID to remove those in year 2. They are a fire risk also, but they are not in quite such close proximity to homes. Just a few pictures of the access to the waterfall walk. I don't know if any of you regularly walk it, but you really had to clamber through a lot of overgrown branches to get there. It's now a nice, easy, open passage. Finally, social responsibility. So the 2 projects that were set out in the business plan were support for the Hout Bay Volunteer Emergency Medical Service and training for Emergency First Aid Response Programme, an EFAR programme. As you hopefully saw, we've donated a 12-lead ECG monitor to the Hout Bay Volunteer Emergency Medical Service, and we will donate a capnograph and new uniforms. And these were the 3 items the team identified that would be the most beneficial to them. We're very grateful to the 12 local residents who volunteered for first aid training to enable us to put in place that EFAR programme. The first training sessions are scheduled for December, and thereafter we'll put in place a process with WatchCon to ensure that first aiders on the ground are informed whenever there's a medical incident in our area. They'll also receive ongoing refresher training. And obviously with the consent of the volunteers, they could also make themselves available to provide assistance elsewhere in the valley. But in addition, we have identified 3 further projects which we believe warrant support from SEBCID under the social responsibility banner. Firstly, the Iwai Ukapila community cleanup, which I mentioned. If you're not aware, this is a group of amazing volunteers who give at least 2 hours, 3 times a week to picking up litter and generally cleaning Iwai. It's a phenomenal initiative, which we at first thought we would support just with the provision of some black bags. But having met them and heard how in need they were of more support to get better organised, the committee has been providing assistance in a variety of ways. For example, we've been helping them draw up agendas for and chairing and conducting their meetings. We've helped them source some storage, secure storage for their tools. We introduced them to jackhammers who have been phenomenally generous in their support. And we've drafted a not insignificant amount of policy and procedural documents to formalise their efforts and potentially pave the way to them registering as an NGO. So of course, Iwai is not officially within our formal boundaries, but all of us drive past the police circle on a regular basis and stand to benefit from this being a cleaner and tidier area. And far more important than just the aesthetics, the work the Ukapila team are doing to stop litter making its way into the stormwater drains at the police circle has an enormous beneficial impact on the ecology of the riverbed, which is central to our valley, and also ultimately onto the beach, which so many of us enjoy. Secondly, it's become clear that we need to address the skate ramps in the park at the bottom of Andrews Road. As you probably all know, the road was diverted some years ago to provide a stretch of tarmac for wheeled entertainment. But the skate ramps in situ are informal and subject to vandalism. So we could, of course, just remove them, but there are many youngsters from all over who come to skate. And without ramps, I'm sure they're just going to use their resourcefulness to create something. So we feel the best option is to invest what we anticipate will be a relatively small amount of budget in installing 2 permanent skate ramps. We've discussed the concept with Ward Councillor Quintus, who's very supportive, and with the team behind the Eyetu skate park at the Iwai Circle, who are keen to support us with design ideas. Lastly, Keith Cronwright on our committee has long been keen to drive a project to improve reading skills for underprivileged children in the valley. And with the Dennis Goldberg House of Hope set to open its doors in our area early next year, we see an opportunity for the CID to deploy a relatively small amount of funds to transporting children to this new facility for them to participate in their reading programme. Still an idea in its infancy, but something we hope residents will concur is worthy of the CID supporting. So that brings to a close the remarks I wanted to make on operations. I do just want to recap on all our communication channels, because nothing that the CID does is of any value if those of you who reside here and are funding this are not aware. So to the very best of our ability, we believe we have a database which contains email addresses for the vast majority of homeowners via which we send our monthly newsletters. These may in time not be monthly as the CID becomes more established and the news flow diminishes, but for now we're aiming to communicate each month. And each time we email out an update, we flag this on our dedicated WhatsApp channels, on our Facebook page, and most importantly via our website, which really is a mine of all the information one could possibly want on our CID, as well as having a list of very useful contacts at the City of Cape Town. And lastly, as a reminder, we now have a dedicated cell phone for residents to call or WhatsApp if they need. Before we move on to the formal steps of this evening, I wanted to briefly touch on arrangements with our neighbouring security estates, Tibberscliff and Bergendal. Firstly, Tibberscliff, which is really much more embedded in our area. We are delighted to have a very positive collaborative working arrangement with the estate manager there. We're sharing access to cameras on or close to our shared boundaries. We're sharing real-time alerts on potential security risks identified via the cameras and collaborating on response in the event of an alert. And Tibberscliff has also reiterated its intention to make a direct financial contribution to the SEBCID budget in their financial year commencing February 21. And obviously, as soon as that is finalised, we will confirm that, but it's a very welcome contribution. Similarly, Bergendal Estate, which shares a boundary with us on Wood Road and an adjacent boundary on the mountainside, very committed to collaborating in respect of flagging potential security incidents detected by a respective CCTV monitoring. And next on the agenda of this topic is to schedule a meeting with Hanging Meadows. And turning to the complexes at the bottom of Barbianscliffe Road, I've said several times that we are committed to trying to secure some form of financial contribution from these body corporates to reflect the benefits that they do receive from the CID. We've had a very promising discussion with Riverview in this regard, and are grateful, as I say, that they're already providing the storage and ablution facilities to the gardening team at no cost. So discussions with the remaining body corporates remain a priority, but given the investment of time that has been required to achieve everything else that I've set out this evening, the reality is that these will only take place next year. So we will now move on to what we need to vote on this evening. Firstly, the proposed budget for the year from July 2021 to end of June 2022, which is year 2 of the 5-year term of the CID. As you'll see, we are not proposing making any changes to the budget versus that which was published in the original business plan. It is very early days in the establishment of our CID, but based on the progress of expenditure to date, we're comfortable that budget for the following year remains appropriate. The implementation plan, again for year 2, is also exactly as was laid out in the initial business plan. All these slides will obviously be made available on the website as soon as this meeting's over if you want to look in more detail. And then on professional appointments, we've selected Harry Curtis & Co as our auditors. They are used by many other CIDs and have immense experience in this sphere. We were pleased to be referred by Harry Curtis to Accountit, business owned by Ros Akers, and she picked up her first CID accountancy job 12 years ago and has been building up her specialisation in this area ever since. So I think we're in a very safe pair of hands there with her looking after our accounting. With respect to the company secretary role, to date this really has been something of a hybrid role fulfilled by a combination of Emma, myself and Alison Lowe. For the foreseeable future, that will remain the case. And turning to the last official business of this evening, the election of directors, we have 8 nominees, 4 of whom are existing interim board members, obviously myself, Fani Milan, Alison Lowe and Keith Cronwright, and then 4 other SEBCID members have put themselves forward for nomination. The board has decided that based on the portfolios required and in the interest of best practice with respect to decision making, we will elect a board of 7 members only. Therefore, please do closely follow the instructions on the voting form and ensure you tick only up to a maximum of 7 of the nominees. And that concludes my comments for this evening, and we'd be very happy to take your questions. If you feel you would like to use the microphone in the room, if you want to project your voice, oh yes, sorry, you will need to use a microphone in the room because otherwise the audience online won't be able to hear you. So, okay.
Briefly, what is the difference between armed response and tactical?
Sorry, you need to use the mic.
So the question is, what is the difference between armed response and tactical response? Armed response is the vehicles that you see driving around all the time through Hout Bay, whether it be Deep Blue or ADT. A tactical response vehicle is manned by individuals who have a higher level of training and capabilities to deal with incidents. And they also have a lot of different equipment within the vehicle. So they'll have spikes that you can roll out into the road to stop a vehicle. They'll have a battering ram to to bring a door down. And actually, interesting, some of the armed response vehicles around aren't actually armed, whereas a tactical vehicle is always armed and is armed with a greater armory of weaponry, so to speak. Perhaps that's easier. If you want to ask a question.
If it was a localized incident in Hout Bay and not elsewhere in the peninsula, would there be backup vehicles from ADT?
So the question is, if there was an incident in Hout Bay and not elsewhere on the peninsula, would there be backup vehicles from ADT? So what ADT has been doing has been deploying tactical vehicles in specific areas. So the vehicle that's been deployed last month in Hout Bay will only remain in Hout Bay. They have a vehicle in Camps Bay. I'm sure they have them in other areas. I'm not particularly familiar with elsewhere. I think we can assume that if there was a serious incident in Camps Bay, possibly the Hout Bay vehicle would be asked to provide backup, but really that's not something that they're not charging for that service at all. So it will obviously be at their discretion as to where the vehicles will get deployed. Anybody else want to ask a question? Yes. Okay.
Sure. Hi, Jack Fletcher, Bargains Cliff. So first I'd like to congratulate the interim committee on getting the whole thing up and running as rapidly as they have.
Sorry, can you come a little closer for the Zoom call? Can you come a little closer for the Zoom people on
Shall I
Zoom?
take the mic?
Oh, take
Yeah,
the mic.
thank
yeah.
you, thank you.
Take the mic.
Yeah, so my congratulations to,
Yeah, you've got to be close to it.
Congratulations to everyone for getting the whole thing up and running as rapidly as you have. I think that's a remarkable achievement. I have two questions. One is maybe a little bit trivial, but I noticed the plan is to spend the budget 100%. Did you think about retaining some kind of reserve and make a decision on that? So that's the first question. And the second question is, so there have been a number of contracts made. Many of them are several years, 2, 3 years, I think, if I read the documents correctly. So my question is, those contractors, are any of them SEBCID members or residents, or in fact connected to anyone in the committee?
So I'll take those two questions separately. In terms of planning to spend the budget in its entirety, so we're obviously very early stages in this year, but the process that one goes through in order to build the budget is bottom up. So if you remember the history of how we went along this journey, so the first thing that happened was a survey was sent out to residents within the community, to property owners within the community, asking them what, if anything, they would like to see improved. The steering committee then took those results of that survey away, and that was what informed the business plan that was drawn up. So then we said, what does everybody want to see improved? How would we do it? Once we were confident that we had a plan in place on how to do it, then we costed it. And then the budget was drawn up precisely on that basis of delivering. Obviously, where if it's at all possible to achieve things for less than was budgeted, then that will be done. And as we move through the year, then there will be a review of our expenditure. But we certainly haven't budgeted for any kind of surplus at this stage to cover unforeseen eventualities, because we believe that we built the budget so in such a fashion from bottom up that shouldn't occur. And if we were to encounter, obviously costings change as well, because the budget was built a certain amount of time ago, and so if costings come out any different, materially more expensive than what we'd anticipated, then we'd have to adjust another line item to account for that. But we haven't encountered anything of that nature thus far. And your second question on the contractors, no, I mean, obviously you're all familiar with Deep Blue. They're a local Hout Bay business, but certainly Renier, who owns the business, doesn't live within our area, and nobody on the committee has any personal connection to him. Andrew Preen, similarly, who owns Allo Africa, lives in Hout Bay. I don't know where, it's not within our area, and no one has a connection. He was actually recommended through Friends of the River when we were looking for contractors. So we in both public safety and for the what I call the sort of green aspect of our programme, we went out. It was a 5-way tender process for both.
Is there any restriction on members of the SEBCID community participating?
Is there any restriction on SEBCID members participating in tenders? No, I can't see why that would be the case. If we'd gone through a proper adjudication process, if there'd been an appropriate tender process, if it happened to be somebody that was within the area, and it was a fair and just appointment, there's no restriction. So, do you want to use the mic, or do you want me to repeat your question?
Well, it's a pretty simple question.
Okay.
I'm talking about the past. Some months ago, we had problems in Scottsville Circle, and the cameras did not cover the specific area which had the problem. I just want your assurance that now that we are formal and we have a formal organization, every single house will get exactly the same coverage through the cameras. In other words, nobody will be left behind. So
the question is that historically in Scottsville Circle, there's been some problems and the cameras didn't detect what those problems were. So the gentleman is asking for an assurance that under a CID structure that every single home will be covered and that no one will be left behind. The most important thing I must stress is that the cameras, everything that the CID does, everything it spends its money on is with respect to our public open spaces. So cameras, firstly, cannot be monitoring homes because the CID funds must be spent on monitoring space, anything that's be protecting the public open spaces. Also, CCTV law prohibits you from directing a camera directly at a home. So at the moment, we're looking at a network of about 102 cameras. Many of those are on the perimeters, because obviously what we want to do is to try and ensure that we don't encounter any problems in the first place. So the bulk of the cameras run along the mountainside perimeter and along Main Road. And then we have to place them strategically around the interior. Some of the cameras on Scottsville Circle, one of the cameras on Scottsville Circle, we were going to move, but then at the end, we've decided to leave it where it is. And we feel that where the cameras specifically are on Scottsville Circle, with the addition of other cameras that are coming into surrounding streets, they will enable us, in the worst case scenario, that somebody does get into the area to commit a crime, whatever it is, that we'll detect them coming in and we'll be able to track them. The cameras are not there to be able to provide us with the ability that if, for example, someone's car gets broken into or there's damage caused to their property, that we can find footage to detect that. If a camera happens to be in the right place to do that, then that's great. But what we're trying to do is to deter crime, and that means trying to protect the perimeters and prevent people coming in to do something they shouldn't be doing. And if they do get in, that we can follow them. So we're mapping junctions and saying, well, if we've got a camera here and we've seen the guy and he's come down here, then he goes that way. There'll always be eventualities that we can't account for. For example, if somebody decides they're going to hop from garden to garden to garden, there's no way that we'd be able to monitor that, but we'll pick them up eventually. So hopefully, given along the perimeters, each camera will see the next, particularly on the mount side, each camera that's installed sees the next one along. We'll know if somebody comes in from our borders, and then we'll, as I say, we'll be able to follow them. If they're along the, we have a very open access to Main Road, and if somebody walks into the area, then we'll pick them up if we see them on the cameras when it's after hours and they really shouldn't be wandering around. And we're seeing that. We're very fortunate at the moment that we're not actually seeing any significant incidents, but I said we get a daily email on the camera reports, and the day that I know is always going to give a lot of information is the day that bins are collected, because the cameras pick up lots of people bin scratching, and then response comes in and moves them out. Sorry, that was a long answer, but did it?
Essentially, my question is a simple. Some people in Scottsville Circle have complained to me. I have no idea whether it's correct or not, but some people have complained that when they go walking, they come to certain areas and there are a whole lot of cameras. There are 4 or 5 cameras or 3 cameras in the same area, whereas in others, there isn't a camera inside.
So the gentleman
saying that they don't think that the coverage is fair. I have no idea about this. I'm just passing it on. It's an important question to be brought.
So the gentleman is saying that the people have told him that there are, in some areas cameras are clustered, and in some areas there's no other cameras at all, and that's absolutely the case. And that's when you rely on professionals who know what they're doing in terms of how to establish a camera network and where to place cameras. And you definitely, at major intersections, they're clustered. There's an awful lot that goes into putting in place a camera network, and you have to think about where to put your cameras, but also what cameras to put where. So, for example, if you have a junction with 2 or 3 or even 4 streets going off in different directions, you could put in what's called a pan tilt zoom camera, which can rotate and look in all directions. But if for that to work effectively, it might actually need to be plonked right in the middle of the junction, which obviously you can't do. And you stand and you look at the houses around that junction and say, well, is there anywhere we could put a pan tilt zoom camera? And in some junctions, there simply hasn't been. So then we say, well, what do we do now? So then we're going to have to use fixed infrared cameras, the little bullet cameras. So then we'll have to position one here looking that way, one that way. I'm happy I mean, it clearly makes absolutely no sense for us to publish the map of the camera layout. Clearly you walking around, you will see the cameras, detecting you with a little white light as you drive or walk in front of them. But we are never going to publish the map of cameras, but we will very happily sit down with anybody who wants to get comfort that where cameras are within their area, and we'll show you the map. Very happy to do that. But I'm sure nobody in this room would like to see us put it on our website. So,
okay, can I?
We're going to take a question online. Yeah.
Okay, so from Johan van der Westhuizen, question.
I think you should take your mask off. It's hard to hear.
Okay, sorry. From Johan van der Westhuizen to everyone: demarcation of City of Cape Town services and SEBCID top-up services. How do you determine this? He refers to an email item 2, and we don't have that.
Yes,
so.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It has, as we've always said, nothing changes. The City of Cape Town remains as beholden as it ever was to deliver on all the basic services that we pay them for. When you have a CID, nothing changes. Everything that we're doing is a top-up service. So everything that I've talked about tonight is over and above what we get from the city. Is there an element of overlap? Yes. For example, what we're doing with our Allo Africa team to keep our green spaces clean and tidy. The City of Cape Town does some of that, but they don't have the resource to do it as frequently as we would like to see it done. So there we're replicating what they do, but we're topping up the service. So it's not as clear a line as City does X, CID does Y. Sometimes there is an overlap, but all we're ever doing is a more frequent occurrence because that's what it's deemed is necessary to maintain the spaces. So a very good example would be cutting the grass. So cutting the grass throughout of Hout Bay and specifically in our area was driving us crazy because we had the Allo Africa team working very hard. Everything was looking great, but the grass was knee high. And we were daily speaking to the local representative for the City of Cape Town to say, when is the grass going to be cut? When is the grass going to be cut? And we were deliberating cutting it because we could do that. We have budget we could deploy to do that because it was grass cutting season and it needed to be done. But then you'd be at the 11th hour, as we were being promised it would happen, and it did happen. But what I feel as a CID we were able to do was get a much better response from the relevant departments at the City of Cape Town to assure us that it would happen. And I was told on a Thursday, I was told it will happen this weekend, and lo and behold, on Sunday they appeared and they cut grass, and hopefully you've now seen that all the grass and all the verges everywhere within Hout Bay have been cut. So, as I say, there is sometimes a degree of overlap, but there it would just be an additional frequency rather than relieving the city of any of their responsibilities.
There was a question back there.
Tim.
Hi, I'm not sure, just coming back to the question earlier on the cameras, I don't know, it'll take a lot more extra work and administration, but I know that a lot of people have got their own cameras. I've got 2 cameras which go onto the road. Maybe if a list is created for Deep Blue or whoever within the group, that those that have got cameras can be called upon at some stage to go back and look at the records if necessary.
Yeah, so the question is whether there's scope for anybody in private residences that has cameras that look onto the public spaces, onto the roads, whether they could be added into the monitoring network. There's definitely a possibility. The other thing that we've learned about cameras is that they need to be very modern to be able to run the software that we're fortunate enough to be able to run. And the software in the cameras themselves is evolving all the time. So the first question will be, what is the specification of the cameras? But if the specification is such that the software can work, then it's feasible. There'll be an additional fee for that monitoring, but it would be minimal given that the hardware would be there already. Sorry, it's also a very good moment for me to just remind everybody, if they haven't read about it, that Tim, who just asked that question and is in the insurance business by trade, has negotiated a wonderful deal for all of us within our area. And thanks to the additional security measures that have been in place, he has an insurance broker that is guaranteeing to offer people savings on their premiums, depending on their claims history, being reasonable. But we've communicated this a couple of times in our newsletters. I can circulate Tim's email address again, but anybody who's keen in getting an alternative quote for their insurance can contact Tim.
Okay, we have a long question here from the online group, but I'm going to read it. We are entering our summer fire season. This is from Guy Preston. We're entering our summer fire season. Invasive species are a particular threat to the impact of wildfires. Individual homeowners should also ensure that invasives are cleared, as well as to take precautionary measures to protect their houses, example, fire ladders, closing of eaves. Can a CID seek to promote this along with controlling the invasives on public open spaces and along fire breaks? In January 2000 fires, every one of the 81 houses that burned down was surrounded by invasive plants. By the time of the 2015 fires, the effort of working for water, working on fire, and the city had greatly reduced the risks, and only 8 structures were burned down. Again, every one of them surrounded by invasives. In terms of the National Felt and Forest Fire Act of 1998, the penalties of allowing a fire to spread by failing to take such actions are potentially very severe.
All valid points. For those of you, and I know there's several of you here and online who attended the meeting that we had with Richard Burns from the City of Cape Town's Invasive Species Department last Thursday. He couldn't have stressed this more strongly as well, that the importance of clearing invasives on your own properties. Neither the CID nor the municipality have the rights to come and clear those aliens, but the presentation that he gave was very compelling in terms of the rationale for doing so, both in terms of the excessive use of water. The invasive species tend to use a lot of water. They obviously crowd out the indigenous species, and in many cases, as Guy mentions, they are a fire risk. So in a recent update that we sent after we had a review of our area with the Cape Peninsula Fire Prevention Association, in the email that we sent with the feedback from that meeting, I included a link to the National Felt and Fire and that important piece of legislation, which does actually make it very clear the responsibilities that you have. For example, if you own, in theory, your property, you are responsible for ensuring that you don't pose a fire risk to your adjacent property. And were your neighbour's house to burn down and the invasive trees on your property be the cause of that, you might invalidate your neighbour's insurance policy. So I think when it comes to the close proximity in which our properties are, and the rational and reasonable sort of nature of what you can expect of people to do with their gardens, it's not like we'll all have to rush out and chop down the trees in our garden, but it's something we have to be mindful of. And particularly if you do have vacant residential land, if you have a large plot, then that legislation requires you to actually maintain a fire break against any neighbouring properties. And obviously that is the case for some people within our area, that they do have large enough vacant land that they should be mindful of their fire safety responsibilities to their neighbours. Anyone in the room?
Okay, we have another question from the Zoom call from Richard Ball. With even a possible freezing of state salaries and many businesses and individuals under financial pressure, will SEBCID be reviewing any automatic annual increases in the SEBCID budget?
So the budget will be reviewed every year. The budget, as I said, at this stage, we are very comfortable with the budget proposed for year 2. But as we get closer to year 2 and we get further through year 1, then through being a regulated entity, we have to review our budgets. And if there are revisions that can be made, they will be made. We have absolutely no incentive whatsoever to spend more money than we need to. We have an obligation to deliver on the business plan that the 60%, more than 60% of property owners voted for. Once we've delivered on that business plan, if we can do that with less of a budget in outer years than we hoped, then obviously any of those savings can be potentially passed on. But it won't be the case that if we've achieved savings that we then go and look for other things to spend money on in order to deploy the funds that we budgeted through the 5-year term.
We have anybody online on the Zoom call got any more questions? We just got another one from Penelope Brown. There's been no mention of the erection of streetlights. A sensitive area for many people in the environment. Research shows that streetlights do not deter crime. Please, can you reassess this as it is an unnecessary expense, waste of energy, causes light pollution?
I'm going to get a T-shirt made, and it's going to say on the front, the CID is not installing streetlights. It has never been part of the CID business plan, budget, never. I understand there's confusion because the vote that was conducted to determine if streetlights should be rolled out was coincidental with part of the CID project taking off. So I fully understand that people see the two as being intermingled. They are not. The streetlight project was raised by Ward Councillor Quintus, who reminded the whole of Hout Bay that the municipality had budget set aside to install streetlights, and if any area wanted them, they could be installed, but a vote had to be conducted. A vote was conducted entirely separate of the CID process, entirely separate of the CID steering committee. A vote was conducted and more than 60% of people in Scottish Estate and Barbianscliff voted in favour of streetlights. Council took that vote and approved the installation. It was, to the best of my recollection, I'll have to go and check, but I think they were due initially to be installed this financial year. I checked recently and the installation had been delayed by at least 2 years. So whether or not they will be installed, I don't know, but if they are, not a penny of the cost will come from the CID budget, and it was never part of the CID implementation plan. But Alfonso, will you make me that T-shirt? He makes T-shirts for a living, you see, so. Yes.
I bumped into the ambulance and I picked them up the idea of giving you some equipment so I can call on you. And they, I explained to them that through my medical aid, through the AA, and through my insurance, I'm a member of Medicare 911, which they then informed me is not them, and that the ambulance in Hart Bay is a government-sponsored, well, they take you to the government hospitals and that's all. Is this correct, or?
So
I'm just trying to understand, what they do. Can I phone them and say, hi, take me to the hospital? Or?
So the question relates to the volunteer ambulance that's based in Hout Bay, and how is it funded, and what would happen if you called that ambulance, and where would it take you? So it's funded by a combination of donations and Metro funding. And I think as we all know that in the event of a medical emergency, if you have your own medical aid and you have a number that through that medical aid you can call to get an ambulance, then that would probably be the best port of call for you. But for anyone who doesn't have medical aid, or for those incidences that do unfortunately happen, where there is a medical emergency and we have the most amazing resource in Hout Bay of WatchCon, and most people's first reaction will be to call WatchCon, WatchCon will put out the call for pretty much the first ambulance that they can get. And if that happens to be that Hout Bay Volunteer Emergency Medical Service, then I think you'll be happy to take the first ambulance that comes. In terms of where they would take you, if you've got medical aid, I personally don't actually know the specifics of that. The intention of providing some support to that Hout Bay Volunteer Emergency Medical Service ambulance was not about trying to buy an ambulance service for Scottish Estate and Barbianscliff. It was about trying to fulfil our social responsibility ambitions through the business plan as well. It was actually, when we built the business plan, in some ways we were quite fortunate that we looked at our area and said, well, what do we really do to tick that social responsibility box? Because it's not as if we're based in a commercial area where there's lots of vagrants and you can try and set up a shelter or a soup kitchen or whatever. So we did somewhat scratch our heads a little bit to decide how best to meet this aim. But it was something that interestingly came out of all the committee, was a concern about availability of emergency medical services, given that if you're calling a private ambulance, the chances are it will come over the mountain. So I don't know who you spoke to from Hout Bay Volunteer EMS, but Matthew Rosenberg runs it. And we asked him to come and meet with us, and we sat with him and we spoke at length, and were staggered at quite the complexities of running an ambulance and getting staff for it and getting funding. But we asked him in simple terms, what can we do to help improve access to emergency medical services for Scottish Estate and Barbianscliff, but also obviously therefore by extension the whole of Hout Bay. And the conclusion we came to that we would love to have thought that we could provide some financial support, and that maybe enough of the other CIDs around Hout Bay would also match us and provide support so that that ambulance could be at least on the road 24/7. And that's still something that we are committed to working towards, to trying to encourage other CIDs to support them. But in the short term, we weren't able to give them enough money to get them bodies to make it available more often. What we were able to do was give them a donation, which got them better equipment, so that if there's an incident, whomever they might go to help may be better served by the equipment we've been able to donate.
No, that's fine. I'm not arguing, I was just amazed that if you phone 911, it's just a completely different ambulance that comes to us. It's not them. Yeah, I thought it was there, but it isn't.
No, so the gentleman saying that he thought if he was very surprised to hear that if he phones 911 that it's not that the volunteer ambulance that comes. So the volunteer ambulance by definition is manned by volunteers, and they only run approximately 9 shifts a month, I think off the top of my head, because they've got full-time jobs. So that's why they're predominantly available on weekends and some other evenings. But yes, unfortunately, they're just volunteers.
Yeah, the original plan when we started talking to them was to help them with a new ambulance. They were concerned about how long they had been operating, the maintenance costs of the current ambulance. But their thinking now is, no, they can keep that ambulance running for many more years with the proper amount of maintenance. They would rather now be hiring professional full-time employees to man the ambulance service, as opposed to relying totally on volunteers. So that's would be the subject of the conversation we have with the other CIDs, that we collaborate on that project to help them engage full-time professional employees with the ambulance service. I think.
Okay, but as long as everybody's aware, phone 911, it's not that ambulance that's going to come to you, it's going to be from Cape Town or wherever the ambulance comes.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate that.
Any other questions? Yes.
So I'm just wondering if Deep Blue have been approached to try and negotiate with our area to try and reduce the alarm costs, so that we can save some more money there, maybe.
Yeah, to be honest, we have quite a long to-do list with Deep Blue, but it is on there. We have raised the prospect with them, and they are absolutely open to the idea that if we can get, what I need them to do is just run the numbers and tell me we've got this many homes in your area at the moment. If you get to that number plus X, then we'll give you a discount of Y. Right now, though, we've really got them very focused on the deployment of the cameras. It's a small business. You know, there's sort of 3 senior executives running it. And they're very hands-on, and at the moment the key focus is getting those cameras installed, but it's absolutely on the to-do list. And I mentioned that there was 32 cameras that were already in situ that were being funded either by Neighbourhood Watch or clusters of local residents. And when Deep Blue took over the monitoring of those cameras, they did waive a month of monitoring fees as a goodwill gesture. I mean, obviously, if you weren't one of those clusters of residents, or you weren't, and that is an important point. If you make a donation to Hout Bay Neighbourhood Watch, or have been donating to Hout Bay Neighbourhood Watch specifically for the camera fund, then that is something that you most definitely can stop should you choose, or just divert it to Neighbourhood Watch, because the cost of monitoring the cameras, which was being funded by that Neighbourhood Watch account, is now being fully funded by the CID. I just as we seem to be maybe drawing to a close, but I'm happy to take more questions. But if you leave and you have a voting form, please ensure that you hand it in to the lovely lady Mick, I believe, who has the magic orange envelope. Yes, so please don't leave without handing in your voting form. Any other questions?
I just wanted to mention from Gavin, Alfred and myself are stepping down from the board. It's been a long journey. We've been working on this for almost 3 years now. Yeah, and have been very impressed with the energy, enthusiasm, dedication of the team. And I'm sure it's going to be in fantastic hands moving forward. In my case, I need to focus on work. I don't have time anymore to be able to spend working on the CID. So I'll be watching very closely and helping as much as I can. And to Fani and Doreen, to Keith and Helen and Alison, thank you very much for all your contributions. And you've been great friends. I very much enjoyed what we've accomplished. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a question. There's a question of the profile of the candidates. That is,
We've got the link.
yes, so in the information that was, oh yes, so I think Emma, you've shared it, haven't you? Yes, there's a link been placed in the chat room for the profiles of the candidates. Obviously, if anybody hasn't seen that already, it was put on our website for a few days now. If anybody hasn't seen that already and wants to see it now, we can, well, we could bring up, no, I can't bring it up here. Technology is a bit challenging here, but we can certainly, if you want to come and look at the profiles on one of these laptops. Can I bring it up here? Come on.
Microsoft. It's that funny thing.
Because that's not connected to the internet, is it?
It is.
Oh, is it?
Oh, the other line is changed.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So, does anybody want to concede? Do you want me to read it out? Otherwise, I would please do come and if you want to have a look, please come and to one of these laptops and have a scroll through so you can read yourself if you feel you'd like to have a read before making a decision.
Did you mention to remind them that they're putting their voting form with an
And obviously for everybody online, just a reminder that you please, the voting form needs to be emailed back within 60 minutes of this meeting concluding, which it feels like it's concluding now. So yes, I would say by 8:45 p.m. we'll be, because we'll conclude in about 10 minutes. So everybody online needs to return their signed voting forms, either they can be signed electronically, they need to be returned by 8:45 p.m. please. Cheers.
I'm going to shut it down.
Yeah, okay.
You want to maybe mention to the other candidates that we can have a glass of wine?
Yeah, well, Chazelle's just left,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's fine.
She knew, I spoke to her about it.
Oh, yeah, she said she had to get home because their kids are at home.
You want to put your number in?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know who you are. Oh, you're, oh, okay, yes, no, we've emailed a couple of times. I'm slowly getting
If
to
you
know
want to
everybody,
just
but
put
not
this in.
You're way ahead of everybody else, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And yeah, drop in your form before you go.
I mean, you parliamentarians can vote for themselves.
I don't know when she's
At home by themselves. So you-